Nothing you meet is random, it's all connected. What if the warmest smile in the room was hiding a knife behind the teeth? What if the person who always jokes was never joking at all? He didn't notice it at first. The way she laughed when he spoke, the way her compliments always came with a quiet sting. To anyone else, it was harmless banter, but to him, it felt like being scratched where the skin was already thin, like something unseen had started gnawing through the edges of his mind. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what if what irritates them is you?" She was always kind, but never kind enough. Always supportive, yet never without a sigh, a smirk, or a sentence that cut just a little too deep. "Wow, you actually did it," she'd say, as if success was a surprise. "You're getting better at talking to people," she'd whisper, as if she still saw you as broken. And you brushed it off, laughed along, told yourself you were being too sensitive. But the unconscious never lies, and somewhere inside you felt it, a cold undercurrent beneath their warmth. Jung called it the shadow projection, when someone cannot bear their own darkness, so they reflect it onto others. They're jokes, not jokes. They are tiny daggers shaped like smiles. The danger isn't in the words. It's in the silence that follows, when you're left questioning yourself. So ask yourself, who's laughing while watching you bleed on the inside? Sometimes it's not what they say. It's how your soul tightens every time they enter the room. And that's not imagination. That's your psyche, whispering truth. What if the hand that helps you was the same hand loosening the bolts behind your back? He told her everything, his dreams, his next step, his quiet hopes for something better. She listened, smiled, and said exactly what he needed to hear. But somehow, days later, things began to slip. Appointments were missed, files vanished, wrong turns, wrong advice, just enough chaos to slow him down, never enough to accuse, always enough to confuse. Carl Jung warned us, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But some reactions are corrosive, and some people wear masks of care while planting seeds of ruin. She didn't scream. She didn't block him. She guided him off the path, told him it was safer this way, wiser, that he was too impulsive anyway. And you would have believed it too, because it came cloaked in love, wrapped in concern. But the shadow isn't always loud. Sometimes it sabotages gently, through forgotten messages, through favors with strings, through small mistakes, made just too often to be accidents. And in the quiet, he began to wonder. Was it just the universe turning against him? Or someone right next to him, gently pulling him under? You see, resentment doesn't always explode. Sometimes it whispers. And if you've ever felt yourself shrinking slowly after every interaction with someone helpful, then maybe it wasn't help. So ask yourself, whose voice do you still follow, and even when it leads you away from yourself? Because sometimes the sabotage isn't a battle, it's a slow unraveling disguised as care. And the most dangerous enemy is the one who smiles while steering you wrong. What if someone stood right beside you, but their soul had already left the room? He called her first. Not the world, not his colleagues, her. Because in his mind, she was still part of his safe circle. She answered, of course, calm, polite. But her voice didn't match the weight in his chest. And when he told her what had just happened, the promotion, the loss, the breakthrough, she simply said, "Oh, that's nice," and changed the subject. Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter." And that's exactly what this was. Not abandonment. Something colder. The illusion of connection. She was there in body, but never in spirit. Her support came wrapped in detachment, like someone touching you through glass. You could scream, cry, or triumph. And she would nod, then glance at her phone. At first, he thought she was tired, distracted, but the pattern was too clean, too repeated. She vanished in moments that mattered most, not with noise, but with absence. A silence that didn't comfort, it erased. You felt it, haven't you? That strange ache when someone you love fails to feel you. Fails to witness your rise, your fall, your trembling human core. It's not that they hate you, it's that they've disassociated from themselves and from you. And in that void you begin to wonder, is it worse to be betrayed by an enemy or forgotten by someone who claimed to care? Because sometimes the deepest wound is the silence that follows your joy, or the quiet denial of your pain. And maybe now you realize she didn't disappear. You were never truly seen.
What if someone claps for you, just to drown out the sound of their own envy?
It happened again. He shared good news, something small but meaningful. Before the words left his mouth, she already had a better story, a bigger achievement, a louder victory. And just like that, his moment vanished, replaced by hers. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But what if what you're calling normal is actually a silent war? He started noticing the pattern. Every time he took a step forward, she took two, or said she did. Every celebration turned into a comparison. Every compliment became a competition.
And you have probably met someone like this. Someone who can't let you shine for too long without adjusting their own light. They're not cruel, they're not hostile. They're just always trying to measure themselves beside you. Not because you're trying to compete, but because they are.
This isn't about ego, it's about projection. Jung believed that the hidden self, the shadow, often reacts violently to another person's light. So when someone can't handle your joy, your growth, your expansion, they don't attack it. They match it, outdo it, diminish it, not in volume, but in presence. And here's the unsettling truth. Maybe it's not success they fear, but that your success reminds them of their silence. So now you ask, is she clapping for him, or for the version of herself she wishes she'd become? Maybe the real competition was never declared. Maybe it was buried inside the shadow. And maybe, just maybe, the person keeping score
was you.
What if your name traveled faster than your voice, twisted, bent, and delivered back to you in pieces? He didn't hear it directly. He felt it. The shift in tone when mutual friends spoke. The questions that came wrapped in subtle suspicion. The way someone smiled too politely, like they knew something about him he didn't know about himself. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And so instead of looking inward, they speak outward, they project, they poison, slowly. She never attacked him openly. No, she was too clever for that. Her shadow worked in whispers. A twisted version of his story here, a harmless comment there. Just enough distortion to shift perception, not a lie, Not quite. But something worse. An emotional infection passed from ear to ear. And you know that ache. When others look at you like a question mark, you didn't write. When your truth gets rewritten in the mouths of those who never asked for it. This wasn't gossip. It was control. Because when they can't limit your growth, they'll try to corrode your image. Jung believed that the unconscious sabotages others to soothe its own shame. So when someone wounds you in silence, what they're really doing is running from the wound inside themselves. But here's the haunting part. What if the story they told about him was a story someone once told about them? And now you must ask, are you safe or just not useful enough to betray yet? Because long before the blade comes the rumor, and long after it fades, the shadow still echoes in the room. What if your biggest victory was met not with applause, but silence dressed as a smile? He had rehearsed it in his head, how she'd light up when he told her. The promotion, the thing he'd worked for in silence, sweat, and solitude. He finally said it. And she blinked once, then said, "Cool," and looked at the clock. Carl Jung warned us. What you resist not only persists but grows in size. And envy, especially the silent kind, grows like a vine around the heart, choking joy where it should bloom. She didn't sabotage it. She didn't dismiss it directly. She just couldn't meet him there. Her reaction was flat, her tone hollow, her gaze slightly off, as if the light in his eyes hurt hers. You've seen this, haven't you? You share good news with someone you love, and instead of rising with you, they retreat. They look away. They change the subject. They find a way to shrink what should have been your moment. Jung called this shadow envy. When someone is unable to celebrate you because your success echoes their silence, their regret, their forgotten dreams. So instead of clapping, they withdraw. Instead of joining your joy, they highlight their own absence.
And the strangest part? It hurts more than open hate. Because it comes from someone who was supposed to be happy for you.
Now you wonder, is it your growth that's the problem, or their refusal to grow beside you?
Because sometimes when you rise, you don't lose people to distance, you lose them to depth.
And the higher you climb, the quieter their heart becomes. What if your most fragile moment became the stage for someone else's silent victory? He didn't cry often, but that day something inside him cracked, and so he reached out to her. Not for advice, not for solutions, just to be heard, held, understood. She listened, quietly, then said, "Well, maybe you brought it on yourself." Carl Jung once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. But some people never meet their own pain, so they punish yours." She didn't yell, she didn't leave, she just stayed, cold, withdrawn, slightly irritated as if his sadness was an inconvenience. Her words weren't cruel, but they carried the chill of judgment wrapped in logic. You know this feeling, don't you? You finally open up, peel back the mask, and the person in front of you recoils. Not physically, emotionally. They shift in their chair, change their tone, as if your vulnerability makes them uncomfortable, or worse, superior. Jung believed that when people reject your wounds, they're really running from their own. Because to witness suffering without defense requires a heart that has faced itself. And sometimes the absence of empathy isn't ignorance, it's control. A way to assert dominance through indifference. A quiet reminder that your weakness will never be their burden. So now ask yourself, when you broke, who stayed still just to feel taller? Because maybe they didn't fail to comfort you. Maybe they used your pain as a mirror and turned away from their own reflection.
And the silence that followed?
It wasn't empty, it was chosen. What if every "you should" was never advice, but a leash? He thought she was just protective, careful, experienced. She always had a better idea, a smarter route, a different decision. And he listened, because her voice sounded like wisdom. But over time, his voice got quieter. His instincts grew dull. Every choice felt like it needed her approval first. Carl Jung warned, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And so many never do. They compensate by shaping the lives of others into the mold they never dared step into themselves. She masked it in concern. It's just a suggestion. But her suggestions came with pressure, guilt, doubt, a subtle tightening of emotional debt.
And you felt that pressure too, that invisible weight of having to consider their feelings before you make your own choices.
This wasn't support. It was erosion of autonomy, of self-trust, of freedom. And here is where he cracked. He made a decision without her. And suddenly, the warmth turned cold. Not because he failed, but because he escaped. So now look closer. Was it him who was trapped in her guidance? Or you? When someone offers help, ask, is this for your growth or their comfort? Because not all guidance is rooted in love. Some is rooted in fear. Fear of watching you become what they never could. And in the end, what breaks you isn't their control. It's the moment you realize you gave them the permission to hold the strings. And the silence that follows that realization? Not loud, not violent, just echoing, like a truth that doesn't need proof.
If this stirred something within you, maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. The journey inward begins in silence. Follow the signs, stay aware, and remember, the self is always watching.